And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Today's sea ice analysis showing this open area here in the Chukchi Sea slowly pinching off here as ice increases from the west and the east and the north. And this trend of slowly increasing ice through here continue at least into the first of next week. Coastal water for weather tonight, low pressure here keeps it showery and breezy out over the western, to a lesser extent, central Aleutians. Otherwise, eastern Bering Sea here, not too bad. Light winds, mostly dry conditions. Areas of light snow and snow showers continue from northern Bristol Bay all the way up into the Kotzebue Sound area toward the NOAA Valley. Central eastern part of the state, dry. Some areas seeing mostly clear skies with light winds. All the way down to the North Gulf Coast here, still some diminishing showers, call it, for Kodiak Island. This low tracking eastward there into the Panhandle, bringing some gusty wind and possibly rain heavy at times, southern areas during the evening hours. And then that kicks out tomorrow as this system starts to push a warm front with increasing rain into the southern southeast coast, lighter amounts to the north. Easterly flow keeps a few showers going on the southern Kenai Peninsula to Kodiak Island. And still some areas of light snow possible here, Yukon Delta, Norton Sound area, maybe St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait, but nothing heavy. No change over the interior. And showers over the Aleutians. For Sunday, those showers mostly end here for the southeast coast, maybe some isolated shower activity for the eastern Aleutians with a weak trough there, and another weak trough with possible scattered shower activity here for Bristol Bay. Otherwise, most of mainland Alaska looking at dry conditions with light winds into the Gulf of Alaska again. And this system tracks northeastward, bringing another round of heavy wind and rain into the central and southern Panhandle. For coastal water forecasts, east-southeast winds 15 knots on the south coast, central coast, southeast 20, north coast, southeast 15. Lynn Canal, north winds 15 knots, Stevens Passage southeast at 15, and Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots for Saturday with seas up to 11 feet. And not much change for Clarence Strait on Sunday, southeast of 20, seas about 9 feet. Small craft advisories on the south coast, south-southeasterlies at 25 knots. Small craft advisories for the central coast, southeast at 25 knots for Sunday, and east 15 knots for the north coast. Lynn Canal, north winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Central, southern inner channels, southeast winds at 20 knots, 3 to 9 foot seas. And for Prince William Sound, northeast winds at 10 knots with seas at 2 feet. Eastern North Gulf Coast, east-northeasterlies at 15 to 20 knots. Northeast 25 there for the western North Gulf Coast. And southern Cook Inlet, north at 30 knots, northeast 30 knots, Kamishak Bay, Barren Islands, east winds at 20 knots. And for Sunday, northern Cook Inlet, northeast at 10 knots. Still small craft advisories for southern Cook Inlet, where winds will be northeast at 25 knots. North 25, Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, north 20 for the western North Gulf Coast. North 15, eastern North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island Saturday, northeast winds 20 knots. And north to northeast winds 15 to 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay, winds out of the northeast at 15 knots with 4-foot seas. And for Sunday, Bristol Bay, north winds at 10 knots. Kodiak Island, north to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots. And north to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Eastern Aleutians, anywhere from variable to southwest winds at 10 to 20 knots. Small craft advisories for the central Aleutians, southwest 25 to 30 knot winds for Saturday at Akanatka. And then 30 to 40 knot west-northwest winds from Amchitka Island to Shemya. And then for Sunday, west to northwest winds west of Adak at 25 to 30 knots, here through the central Aleutians toward Atka, northwest at 30 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, north to northwest winds there, 20 to 25 knots. For the Kuskokwim Delta coast tomorrow, northeast winds at 15. Very light winds for the Yukon Delta coast at 5 or 5 to 10 knots. Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, same thing, east winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. And for St. Matthew Island, north winds at 15 knots. And the Pribilofs looking at east winds at 20 knots with seas around 9 feet. And for Sunday, really light winds now. St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, variable to south at 5 knots, south 10 knot winds in the forecast for the Yukon Delta coast, northwest 15, St. Matthew Island. But small craft advisories here for the Kuskokwim Delta coast for north winds at 25 knots, with those seas only at 2 feet. And the Pribilof Islands, north at 20, sea 6 feet. For the central and eastern Arctic coast tomorrow up in this area, east winds 20 knots. Brisk wind advisories for the western Arctic coast, east winds 25 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea, east winds at 15. And then for Sunday, the Chukchi Sea, east to southeast winds here, 10 to 15 knots, east to 20 knots for the central and western Arctic coast. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, look for east winds at about 15 knots.